Carl Jung discovered something that will completely shatter everything you believed about that person you loved, but couldn't have. After decades of studying the deepest layers of human consciousness, Jung identified two crucial truths that people experiencing impossible love never recognize. Truths so profound that understanding them transforms pain into power, longing into liberation, and heartbreak into breakthrough. The first truth Jung uncovered will shock you. That person you couldn't be with wasn't the real object of your love. They were serving as what Jung called a psychological projection screen, reflecting back aspects of your own soul that you hadn't yet integrated. The intensity you felt, the magnetic pull, the sense that they were somehow essential to your existence. All of this was your unconscious mind recognizing parts of yourself that you'd been unconsciously suppressing. But here's the second truth that Jung discovered, and this one changes everything. The reason you couldn't be with them wasn't cosmic cruelty or bad timing. It was psychological protection. Your unconscious mind orchestrated the impossibility because you weren't ready for the transformation that being with them would have demanded. The universe wasn't keeping you apart from your soulmate. It was keeping you safe from a level of growth you weren't prepared to handle. Jung spent over 40 years documenting these patterns in his clinical practice, and what he found was revolutionary. People who experience impossible love aren't victims of circumstance. They're unconscious participants in their own psychological development. Every impossible love story is actually a hero's journey disguised as a romance, a spiritual initiation disguised as heartbreak, a transformation process disguised as rejection. Most people experiencing impossible love focus on the wrong questions. They ask why this person can't be with them, what they did wrong, how they can change the circumstances. But Jung discovered that the real questions are completely different. What aspects of yourself were you seeing in them that you haven't developed yet? What psychological growth is this experience preparing you for? What parts of your personality are ready to emerge through this alchemical process of loving someone you cannot have? Jung called this phenomenon psychological mirroring through impossible love. The person you couldn't have was reflecting your own unlived potential back to you with such clarity that you fell in love with your own evolutionary possibilities without realizing it. This is why moving on feels impossible. You're not trying to get over a person, you're trying to get over yourself. But Jung identified something even more profound. He found that people who understand these two truths about impossible love develop what he called conscious relationship abilities that allow them to create connections far deeper than anything they originally thought they wanted. The impossible love stops being about the specific person and becomes about your capacity to recognize and embody the qualities that drew you to them in the first place. If you're beginning to suspect that your impossible love was actually your soul calling you toward aspects of yourself you haven't fully embraced yet, if you're wondering what parts of that person you are meant to become rather than possess, share in the comments what quality you most admired in them. Because Jung believed that recognizing this pattern is the first step toward transforming impossible love from wound into wisdom, from pain into purpose, from ending into beginning. Jung revolutionized psychology when he discovered that what we call falling in love is often falling in love with our own unrealized potential reflected through another person. When you encountered that person you couldn't have, your unconscious mind wasn't just recognizing their attractive qualities. It was recognizing dormant aspects of your own personality that were ready to be activated, developed, integrated into your conscious identity. Think about what specifically drew you to this impossible person. Was it their confidence when you felt insecure? Their creativity when you'd suppressed your artistic nature? Their emotional freedom when you'd learned to hide your feelings? Their spiritual depth when you'd been living on the surface? Jung would have told you to pay attention to these specific attractions because they weren't random. They were your psyche pointing toward your own evolutionary direction. Jung called this process anima and animus projection. Your unconscious mind contains images of your ideal self, qualities you're meant to develop but haven't yet integrated. When you encounter someone who embodies these qualities, especially someone who embodies them naturally and authentically, your soul recognizes its own potential reflected in their being. The magnetic attraction you feel isn't just romantic desire. It's your undeveloped self calling you toward wholeness. But here's where Jung's insight becomes profound. The reason you couldn't be with this person often relates to the very qualities you were projecting onto them. You were attracted to their confidence, but you weren't confident enough to believe you deserved them. You loved their emotional authenticity, but you weren't authentic enough to show them your real self. You admired their independence, but you were too dependent on their validation to function as an equal partner. Jung discovered that impossible love serves as a psychological mirror that shows you exactly what you need to develop within yourself. The pain of not having them becomes the motivation for becoming them, for integrating the qualities that drew you to them in the first place. This is why healing from impossible love isn't about forgetting the person. It's about embodying what you loved about them. Jung observed something remarkable about people who understand this mirroring function. They stop trying to get the person and start trying to become the qualities they recognized in that person. They transform from seekers into becomers. Instead of chasing external completion, they pursue internal integration. The impossible love becomes a roadmap for their own psychological development. This realization changes everything about how you process the experience. You stop feeling rejected and start feeling redirected. You stop seeing them as someone who got away and start seeing them as someone who showed you who you're becoming. You stop mourning the relationship that couldn't happen and start celebrating the transformation that is happening. Jung found that people who master this perspective often experience what he called psychological alchemy. The lead of painful longing transforms into the gold of self-realization. They develop the very qualities they once sought in others. They become the person they were seeking. And in becoming that person, they often attract available partners who possess the depth and authenticity they originally recognized in their impossible love. The person you couldn't have wasn't meant to complete you. They were meant to awaken you to your own completeness. Jung made a disturbing discovery about impossible love that most people never consider. He found that the impossibility itself often serves as psychological protection, keeping you safe from a level of intimacy and growth that would have overwhelmed your current developmental stage. Your unconscious mind, in its infinite wisdom, created circumstances that allowed you to experience profound connection while avoiding the terror of being truly seen, known, and potentially rejected by someone who mattered that deeply. Jung called this the paradox of safe intensity. You could love this person completely because the impossibility created a safety net. You could be vulnerable because you knew the vulnerability had limits. You could show your depth because the relationship had built-in boundaries. The impossibility allowed you to experience the ecstasy of profound connection without the psychological risk of sustainable intimacy. But Jung identified something even deeper in his clinical observations. Many people unconsciously choose impossible love because available love would require them to confront aspects of themselves they're not ready to face. Real intimacy demands that you show up authentically day after day, that you remain lovable even when you're difficult, that you maintain connection even when the initial intensity fades into ordinary human reality. Impossible love allows you to remain perfect in someone's memory, while they remain perfect in yours. Neither of you has to deal with morning breath, bad moods, financial stress, family dysfunction, or the million small disappointments that real relationships require you to navigate together. The impossibility preserves the idealization that makes the connection feel so transcendent. Jung discovered that people who repeatedly fall for impossible partners often have what he called intimacy readiness issues hidden beneath their apparent capacity for deep love. They can love intensely because the intensity has an expiration date built in. They can be vulnerable because the vulnerability is temporary. They can connect profoundly because the profundity is protected by impossibility. This isn't a character flaw. Jung understood it as a developmental stage. Your psyche is gradually preparing you for the kind of sustainable intimacy that requires showing your full humanity to someone who can actually stay and love you through it. The impossible love was training you for possible love by teaching you that your depth is lovable, that your intensity is valuable, that your authentic self is worthy of recognition. But Jung identified the crucial transition point. At some stage, the protection of impossibility must be released in favor of the vulnerability of availability. You must be willing to risk being truly known by someone who could choose to stay or leave based on that knowing. You must be willing to love someone's ordinariness as much as their extraordinariness. You must be willing to build something real rather than just experiencing something magical. Jung found that people who make this transition successfully often create relationships that surpass even their impossible love in terms of actual fulfillment. Because while impossible love teaches you about recognition and intensity, available love teaches you about integration and sustainability. You learn to experience profound connection within the context of shared daily life, to maintain depth while building practical partnership. The impossibility was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be preparation. Your soul was learning to love at depths that would allow you to recognize and create extraordinary connection when you encountered someone ready to build it with you. Carl Jung discovered something that will change how you understand every moment you've spent missing that person you couldn't have. He found that longing itself, when experienced consciously, becomes what he called psychological alchemy, a process that transforms the base metal of emotional pain into the gold of spiritual wisdom. But most people experiencing impossible love never learn how to work with longing as a transformational force. Jung observed that longing contains creative energy that most people waste in repetitive thoughts about what could have been. But individuals who understand longing's alchemical function learn to channel this energy into becoming the person capable of the love they seek. They stop using longing to torture themselves and start using it to transform themselves. Here's what Jung realized about the specific quality of longing that comes from impossible love. It's different from ordinary wanting because it's not directed toward possession. You can't have this person, so your longing becomes pure appreciation, untainted by agenda. This creates what Jung called objectless love, affection that exists for its own sake rather than for what it might gain. Jung documented that people who develop objectless love through impossible experiences often become capable of loving in ways that most people never achieve. They can appreciate beauty without needing to own it. They can recognize worth without needing to claim it. They can feel profound connection without requiring reciprocation. These abilities transform every relationship they enter afterward. But Jung identified a crucial skill that determines whether longing becomes transformational or destructive. He called it conscious suffering, the ability to feel pain fully while maintaining awareness of its purpose. Most people either avoid the pain of impossible love or drown in it, but conscious suffering means feeling the pain while simultaneously understanding its function in your psychological development. When you suffer consciously, longing becomes meditation. Every wave of missing them becomes an opportunity to practice holding intensity without being overwhelmed by it. Every moment of wishing things were different becomes practice in accepting reality while maintaining hope for future possibilities. Every pang of their absence becomes training in loving without attachment. Jung found that people who master conscious suffering through impossible love develop emotional regulation abilities that serve them for the rest of their lives. They learn to feel deeply without being destabilized, to care profoundly without losing themselves, to experience intensity without becoming dependent on it for identity. If you're recognizing that your longing for someone impossible has been teaching you to love more purely, to feel more deeply, to appreciate more fully, take a moment to honor that pain as sacred. In the comments, share simply, "My longing is teaching me," because Jung believed that acknowledging the educational function of emotional pain transforms its entire meaning. But Jung warned about the shadow side of alchemical longing. Some people become addicted to the purity of impossible love because it feels more intense than available love. They unconsciously seek impossible situations because the longing feels more romantic than satisfaction. This keeps them trapped in eternal preparation for love, rather than actually experiencing it. The alchemy is only complete when the gold of wisdom gained through impossible love is applied to creating possible love with someone available. Jung made a revolutionary discovery about why certain people experience impossible love while others never encounter this psychological pattern. He found that impossible love often appears in the lives of individuals whose souls are enrolled in what he called advanced curriculum for consciousness development. Not everyone needs this particular lesson because not everyone is destined for the depths of psychological and spiritual awareness that impossible love can catalyze. Jung observed that souls with this curriculum often incarnate with specific psychological tasks that require them to develop unconditional love, emotional sovereignty, and spiritual maturity. impossible love becomes one of the primary vehicles for developing these capacities. You weren't randomly selected for this painful experience. Your soul specifically chose it because you have the psychological potential to transform suffering into wisdom. But Jung identified something profound about the timing of impossible love experiences. They rarely occur when you're psychologically prepared for them. They happen when your soul is ready for growth that your ego isn't yet equipped to handle. The impossibility forces you to develop resources you didn't know you possessed. You discover depths of resilience, creativity, emotional intelligence, and spiritual strength that conventional relationships might never have activated. Jung called this the pedagogy of the heart. Your heart had to be broken open in this specific way to access chambers of love that would have remained sealed otherwise. The person you couldn't have was serving as an unwitting teacher in your soul's graduate program in advanced loving. They were never meant to be your destination. They were meant to be your catalyst. This perspective transforms every memory of them from evidence of loss into evidence of learning. Every conversation you had was expanding your capacity for depth. Every moment of connection was teaching you what profound recognition feels like. Every instance of their unavailability was strengthening your ability to love without possessing. The entire experience was a masterclass in transcendent love disguised as personal heartbreak. Jung discovered that people who understand their impossible love as soul curriculum often report feeling grateful for the experience despite its pain. They recognize that this person appeared in their lives at exactly the moment their soul was ready to learn what only impossible love could teach. The timing wasn't cruel coincidence, it was cosmic precision. But Jung also found that understanding your impossible love as soul curriculum carries responsibility. If you've been given this advanced lesson in loving, it means your soul has work to do that requires these particular capacities. You're being prepared for a role that demands the ability to love unconditionally, to connect without possessing, to recognize essence beyond form. The loneliness you felt isn't punishment for loving wrong. It's preparation for loving at levels most people never achieve. The depth you develop through impossible love is meant to be shared, but shared consciously, with people ready to receive and reciprocate depth. Your advanced curriculum in love was never meant to be a private experience. It was meant to prepare you to teach others through your example what evolved loving looks like. Jung believed that souls with this curriculum are evolutionary agents for human consciousness around love. Your impossible love wasn't personal failure. It was cosmic training for a more advanced way of loving that humanity is slowly learning to embrace. Jung discovered that the most crucial moment in impossible love experiences comes not during the intensity of connection or the pain of separation, but during what he called the integration phase. This is when you must decide whether the lessons learned through impossible love will be applied to creating available love, or will remain trapped in the realm of romantic idealization. Jung found that most people fail this integration test, which is why they either become cynical about love or addicted to impossible relationships. The integration challenge Jung identified requires developing what he called practical transcendence. You must take the spiritual lessons learned through impossible love and apply them to relationships with ordinary humans in ordinary circumstances. This means loving someone's potential while accepting their current limitations. It means appreciating depth while building daily partnership. It means maintaining emotional sovereignty while creating interdependence. Jung observed that people who successfully integrate impossible love experiences often struggle initially with available partners because everyone seems diminished compared to their impossible love. But this comparison reveals a crucial misunderstanding. You're not comparing two people. You're comparing idealization with reality, projection with presence, fantasy with humanity. The person you couldn't have remained perfect in your mind precisely because you never had to deal with their human limitations, their morning grumpiness, their financial anxieties, their family issues, their bad habits. Impossible love preserves idealization because impossibility prevents disillusionment. But Jung discovered that real love, sustainable love, evolves through disillusionment into something more profound than idealization ever could be. Jung called this the sacred ordinary, learning to find transcendence within availability, depth within accessibility, magic within the mundane. This requires a fundamental shift from seeking perfect love to creating evolved love, from finding someone who completes you to partnering with someone who grows alongside you. But Jung identified a specific sign that you're ready for this integration. You stop comparing available people to your impossible love and start asking different questions. Instead of wondering why available people don't make you feel the same intensity, you ask what kind of intensity you want to build with someone who can actually stay. Instead of missing what you couldn't have, you become curious about what you could create. Jung found that people who successfully make this transition often discover that the love they build with an available partner eventually surpasses their impossible love in every meaningful way. Because while impossible love teaches you about recognition and appreciation, available love teaches you about co-creation and evolution. You learn to experience profound connection while building something real together. If you're feeling the pull to stop living in the realm of impossible love and start creating possible love with someone who can actually be with you, comment below, "I'm ready to build love." Because Jung believed that stating your readiness for integration is often the first step toward attracting the available partner, capable of meeting you at the depths your impossible love taught you to inhabit. The question isn't whether you'll ever love someone as much as your impossible love. The question is whether you're ready to love someone more sustainably, more completely, more realistically than your impossible love ever allowed. Carl Jung made a profound observation about people who successfully transform impossible love experiences. He discovered that hidden within the pain of loving someone unavailable are psychological gifts so valuable that people who never experience impossible love often lack crucial emotional capacities throughout their entire lives. Jung called these gifts the treasures hidden in darkness, abilities that can only be developed through the specific psychological pressure that impossible love creates. The first gift Jung identified is what he termed emotional independence. When you love someone who can't love you back, you're forced to find the source of love within yourself. You learn that your capacity to feel affection isn't dependent on receiving affection. You discover that love is something you generate rather than something you need to receive to feel worthy. This creates an internal wellspring of emotional security that makes you incredibly attractive to others because you love from abundance rather than scarcity. Jung found that people who develop emotional independence through impossible love enter future relationships as contributors rather than consumers. They're not seeking someone to complete them because they've learned to complete themselves. They're seeking someone to share their completeness with, someone to build something beautiful alongside. This shift from needy love to generous love transforms every subsequent connection. The second gift is what Jung called depth tolerance. Impossible love forces you to explore emotional territories that most people spend their lives avoiding. You learn to sit with paradox, to hold contradictory feelings simultaneously, to find meaning in experiences that can't be easily categorized or resolved. You develop psychological muscles that allow you to navigate complexity with grace. This depth tolerance prepares you for relationships with substance that most people are incapable of sustaining. You become someone who can love another person's contradictions, appreciate their shadows as well as their light, support their growth even when it's inconvenient. You can hold space for difficult conversations, navigate challenging emotions, maintain connection through periods of uncertainty. The third gift Jung discovered is what he termed spiritual maturity. Impossible love often serves as initiation into understanding love as something sacred rather than transactional. You learn to love without agenda, to appreciate without possessing, to value someone's existence independent of their role in your life. This transforms your relationship with attachment itself. Jung observed that people who develop spiritual maturity through impossible love often become what he called conscious lovers in all their relationships. They can appreciate friends without needing them to behave certain ways. They can love family members without trying to change them. They can connect with romantic partners without losing their individual identity. But perhaps the most profound gift Jung identified is wisdom about love's true nature. Through impossible love, you learn that the deepest connections often transcend form, that profound recognition can exist even without relationship, that love is ultimately about witnessing and celebrating another soul's existence rather than claiming ownership of their attention. These gifts don't eliminate the pain of impossible love, but they reveal its purpose. Every tear was watering the growth of capacities most people never develop. Your impossible love wasn't meaningless suffering. It was meaningful preparation for loving in ways most people never learn. Jung's most revolutionary insight about impossible love concerned its evolutionary function in human consciousness development. He discovered that people who experience this pattern aren't just dealing with personal romantic challenges. They're participating in humanity's collective evolution toward more conscious, mature, and spiritually based approaches to intimate connection. Your impossible love was preparing you to model a different way of loving that our species is slowly learning to embrace. Jung observed that throughout history, human relationships have been primarily based on survival needs, social convenience, and ego gratification. People partnered for security, status, procreation, and emotional completion. But he identified individuals who were developing beyond these conventional relationship motivations toward what he called soul-based partnership, connections founded on mutual recognition, spiritual growth, and conscious evolution. People who experience impossible love are often being prepared for this advanced form of relating. The pain of loving someone you can't have teaches you that profound connection transcends possession, that authentic love exists independent of relationship status, that recognition is more powerful than ownership. These realizations prepare you to create partnerships based on freedom rather than need, growth rather than security, spiritual communion rather than emotional dependence. Jung believed that souls like yours are evolutionary pioneers in the realm of human intimacy. By refusing to settle for surface-level connections, by demanding authenticity even when it means loneliness, by choosing depth over convenience, you're demonstrating possibilities for human relationship that most people haven't imagined yet. Your standards aren't too high. They're evolutionarily appropriate for someone preparing to model conscious love. But Jung identified a crucial responsibility that comes with this evolutionary role. You must learn to embody the qualities you seek rather than just recognizing them in others. You must become the depth you desire, the authenticity you crave, the emotional sophistication you admire. You can't just be someone who recognizes evolved love. You must be someone who creates it. This means doing the psychological work to integrate the lessons your impossible love was teaching. It means developing the confidence, authenticity, emotional intelligence, and spiritual maturity that would make you an equal partner to someone operating at the level you were recognizing in your impossible love. It means becoming available for available love. Jung discovered that people who embrace this evolutionary responsibility often find that the universe begins presenting them with available partners who possess the depth they originally sought in impossible circumstances. Not because the universe rewards personal development, but because developed people naturally attract others who have done similar inner work. Your impossible love was never meant to be the end of your love story. It was meant to be the beginning of your preparation for a love story that could actually be lived rather than just felt. The person you couldn't have was showing you what's possible when two people with soul recognition abilities choose to build something together rather than just recognizing each other from afar. The evolution from impossible love to conscious partnership isn't about settling for less. It's about creating more than you ever imagined possible. Carl Jung's final insight about impossible love reveals why this experience was never really about the other person at all. He discovered that impossible love serves as a psychological graduation ceremony, marking the completion of your apprenticeship in unconscious loving and your readiness to begin mastery in conscious partnership. The person you couldn't have was your final teacher in the school of projected love, preparing you for the advanced curriculum of integrated love. Jung found that people who fully integrate impossible love experiences undergo what he called a fundamental shift in their relationship operating system. They stop seeking external sources for internal experiences and start generating the love, recognition, appreciation, and connection they once sought from others. This doesn't make them closed off or independent in defensive ways. It makes them magnetically attractive because they love from overflow rather than need. But Jung identified the moment of sacred completion, when you can think of your impossible love with gratitude rather than longing, appreciation rather than pain, blessing rather than loss. This isn't about forgetting them or minimizing what you felt. It's about recognizing that they completed their function in your psychological development. They served as a bridge between who you were and who you were becoming. Jung observed that this completion often brings unexpected peace. You realize you weren't really in love with that specific person. You were in love with love itself, with connection itself, with the recognition of your own capacity for depth and authenticity reflected through their being. They were serving as what Jung called a psychological midwife, helping birth aspects of yourself that were ready to emerge. The sacred completion Jung described involves recognizing that your impossible love accomplished exactly what it was meant to accomplish. It expanded your capacity for authentic connection. It taught you to love without possessing. It showed you depths of feeling you didn't know you contained. It prepared you for partnerships based on recognition rather than need, growth rather than security, spiritual communion rather than emotional transaction. Jung believed that people who reach this sacred completion become what he called conscious relationship creators. They don't just wait for love to happen to them. They actively create the conditions for profound connection by embodying the qualities they seek, maintaining the standards impossible love taught them while remaining open to finding these qualities in available forms. Your impossible love wasn't the universe being cruel. It was the universe being precise, giving you exactly the experience your soul needed to develop capacities required for the love that's actually meant for you. The person you couldn't have was never meant to be your forever. They were meant to be your catalyst for becoming someone capable of forever, with someone who can actually choose it with you. If this journey through Jung's insights about impossible love has helped you see your experience as sacred preparation rather than personal failure, I'd love to hear what you've learned about love itself through loving someone you couldn't have. Share your reflection in the comments because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to understand their own impossible love as wisdom rather than wound. If this exploration resonated with you, please subscribe to continue this journey into the depths of human consciousness, and share this with someone who needs to know that their impossible love was actually possible wisdom. Thank you for trusting me with 30 minutes of your precious time, and for having the courage to explore the sacred mysteries hidden within your own heart.